you've awakened. You're seeing things others can't see, understanding dynamics others are blind to, perceiving realities the collective denies. And your instinct is to share what you're experiencing, to help others wake up, to explain what you're seeing, to bridge the gap between your awareness and their unconsciousness. Carl Jung would say, stop. Your urge to reveal your awakening is one of the most dangerous impulses you can follow. Not because you should hide who you've become, but because revealing certain aspects of your consciousness to unconscious people creates psychological consequences you're not prepared for. Jung discovered through decades of work that there are specific things awakened people must never reveal to those still operating at collective consciousness levels. Not from superiority or secrecy, but from psychological necessity. Revealing these things doesn't help others awaken. It triggers their shadow, invites projection, and puts you in danger you don't recognize until it's too late. I'm about to share the 5 things Jung said you must never reveal if you're spiritually awake. If you're awake, this might save you from mistakes that could cost you your peace, your relationships, or even your safety. Here's what Jung understood that most awakened people learn too late. Unconscious people cannot receive information about awakened consciousness without their psyche distorting it through projection, denial, and defense mechanisms. You think you're sharing truth. They're receiving threat. You think you're offering help. They're experiencing attack. The psychology is simple. When you reveal aspects of awakened consciousness to someone still operating unconsciously, you're essentially holding up a mirror showing them their own unconsciousness. Their ego can't tolerate that reflection. So instead of receiving what you're sharing, their psyche automatically transforms it into something they can reject, attack, or use against you. Jung experienced this repeatedly. Early in his career, he would share his insights openly with colleagues, patients, and the public, and consistently, predictably, people would respond with suspicion, hostility, or exploitation. Not because they were bad people, but because their unconscious couldn't tolerate what he was revealing. He learned through painful experience. There are certain things that awakened consciousness can never safely reveal to those still asleep. These aren't secrets you're hiding. They're realities that unconscious people cannot receive without their psyche weaponizing the information against you or themselves. Think of it like describing colors to someone color-blind. Except instead of confusion, they respond with rage that you're claiming to see something they can't. Their ego experiences your expanded perception as evidence of their limitation, and egos will destroy anything that threatens their stability. Jung's first warning: never reveal the direct spiritual experiences, visions, or encounters with the unconscious that catalyzed your awakening. Not because these experiences aren't real, but because unconscious people cannot process them except through the lens of either worship or pathology. Here's the mechanism. When you describe a profound spiritual experience to someone who hasn't had one, their psyche has only 2 frameworks to interpret what you're saying. Either you're special, and therefore an object of projection, or you're crazy, and therefore something to fear and reject. They can't hear what you're actually describing because they lack the experiential reference point. Their psyche, unable to comprehend the experience on its own terms, will force it into categories they understand: guru or psychotic. If they decide you're special, they'll project their unintegrated self onto you. You become the carrier of their unrealized spiritual potential. They'll idealize you, follow you, demand guidance from you. And when you inevitably fail to match their projection, because you're human, not the archetype they've projected, they'll turn on you with the rage of disillusionment. If they decide you're crazy, They'll use your revelation as evidence of instability. They'll question your judgment, doubt your competence, worry about your mental health. What you experienced as profound spiritual breakthrough, they'll interpret as psychological breakdown, and that interpretation becomes ammunition. Jung learned this after sharing his visions with colleagues during his confrontation with the unconscious. Some decided he was a mystic guru. Others decided he was psychotic. Neither group could simply hear what he'd experienced as a legitimate psychological process of transformation. But here's what makes this especially insidious. Once you've revealed these experiences, you can't take it back. The projection has been activated, the judgment has formed, and you've given them information they'll store and potentially use against you later. Jung's advice was clear. Keep your direct spiritual experiences private. Share them only with others who've had similar experiences and can receive them without projection or pathologization. Your visions, your encounters with archetypes, your moments of cosmic consciousness, these are sacred precisely because they're yours. This doesn't mean you hide that you're spiritually awake. It means you don't describe the specific experiences that brought you there. The experiences were for your transformation, not for others' entertainment or judgment. But spiritual experiences are only one category of revelation that creates danger. The second thing you must never reveal is perhaps even more tempting to share, and even more dangerous when you do. Jung's second warning is direct. Never tell someone you can see their unconscious patterns, their shadow material, or the psychological dynamics they're blind to, even if you're right, especially if you're right, because the ego will fight to the death to protect its unconsciousness. Here's the trap. Your awakening has given you the ability to perceive unconscious material in yourself and others. You can see someone's shadow projections, their unintegrated complexes, their psychological defenses. And because you care about them, your instinct is to help them see what you see. But Jung discovered the unconscious is unconscious for a reason. People have organized their entire psyche around not seeing what they've repressed. Their psychological stability depends on maintaining that blindness. When you try to show them what they can't see, you're not offering help. You're threatening the architecture of their psyche. The response is predictable and vicious. If you tell someone, "I can see your shadow," they'll hear, "I see the darkness you're hiding, and I'm judging you for it." If you point out their projection, they'll experience it as attack. If you name their unconscious pattern, they'll feel exposed and violated. Jung experienced this constantly. A patient would describe a situation, and Jung could immediately see the unconscious dynamics. Early in his practice, he'd share these insights directly. The result? Patients would become defensive, argumentative, or terminate therapy. Not because Jung was wrong, because he was right, and being right threatened their unconscious organization. He learned psychological insight must emerge from within the person, not be imposed from outside. You can create conditions for awareness, but you can't force someone to see their unconscious material before they're ready. Trying to do so doesn't accelerate their awakening. It activates their defenses against awakening. But there's an even more dangerous consequence. They start hiding from you. They become guarded, performative, anxious in your presence. You become someone to be managed rather than someone to connect with. The relationship becomes defined by their awareness that you can see what they can't. Jung's advice: keep your perceptions to yourself. You can see people's unconscious patterns, but naming them serves no one. If they're ready to see their shadow, they'll see it without you pointing it out. Your role isn't to reveal people to themselves. It's to hold space for them to reveal themselves to themselves when they're ready. Live from the awareness you have without weaponizing it by revealing it. See clearly, act wisely, but don't announce what you see. Your perception is for your navigation, not for their education. This principle of keeping your perceptions private extends to another realm that awakened people often feel compelled to share, not realizing the danger it creates. Jung's third warning: never use your experience of synchronicity as evidence to convince others of spiritual truths. Your meaningful coincidences are real, but they're personal psychological events, not universal proofs that translate to others' reality. Here's why this matters. Once you awaken, you start experiencing synchronicity regularly. The universe seems to respond to your internal states. Meaningful coincidences guide your path. You think of someone and they call. You need something and it appears. These experiences are profound and real for you. But here's Jung's insight. Synchronicity is subjective. It's meaningful to you because of your psychological state and your relationship with your unconscious. But to someone else, especially someone unconscious, your synchronicity is just coincidence. The psychology is subtle. Synchronicity requires a developed relationship between consciousness and unconsciousness to be perceived as such. You're seeing meaning because your psyche has developed the capacity to recognize it, but someone without that development sees only random coincidence. They're not wrong from their perspective. They're operating at a different level of perception. When you tell someone, "I was just thinking about you and you called," that proves we're connected. They hear, "I'm reading cosmic significance into random chance." When you say, "The universe gave me a sign," they think you're seeing patterns that aren't there. They can't perceive what you're perceiving because their consciousness hasn't developed the structures necessary to recognize synchronistic meaning. Jung learned this by trying to explain synchronicity to his scientific colleagues. He'd describe profound synchronistic events and watch his peers dismiss them as coincidence. They weren't being closed-minded. They genuinely couldn't perceive the meaningful dimension Jung was experiencing. But here's where revealing synchronicities becomes dangerous. When you use them as proof, people conclude you're either naive or unstable. They think you're engaging in magical thinking. And once they've formed that judgment, they apply it to everything else you say. Your synchronicities become evidence against your credibility. Worse, some people will pretend to see synchronicity to manipulate you. They'll learn what language to use, what coincidences to claim, not because they're experiencing synchronicity, but because they recognize you're susceptible to that framing. Jung's advice: keep your synchronicities private. Experience them, learn from them, allow them to guide you, but don't use them to convince others of anything. Share your synchronicities only with others who've developed enough to experience them too. For everyone else, your meaningful coincidences are just coincidences, and revealing them creates misunderstanding at best and manipulation at worst. But synchronicities are relatively benign compared to the fourth thing Jung warned against revealing. Something that seems like it should be safe to share, but creates perhaps the most dangerous dynamic of all. If you're recognizing this, that you've revealed spiritual experiences and faced projection, told people what you could see about them and triggered their defenses, or used synchronicity as proof and been dismissed, Jung would say, you're learning through pain what should be learned through wisdom. Not everything you experience should be shared. Before we explore the final two things you must never reveal, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue, because these next two things you must never reveal could protect you from the most subtle and dangerous dynamics awakened people face. This is Jung's most counterintuitive warning. Never announce that you're awakened, enlightened, or individuating. Never identify yourself as spiritually advanced, not from false modesty, but because naming your awakening activates dynamics in others that will destroy your peace. Here's the trap. The moment you identify yourself as awakened, you activate the shadow in everyone around you. Your claim to expanded consciousness is experienced, unconsciously, as a claim to superiority. And egos cannot tolerate perceived superiority without responding with one of two patterns: worship or warfare. Some people will respond by elevating you beyond human. You're the guru, the master, the enlightened one. They'll project their unintegrated self onto you and expect you to carry their spirituality for them. They'll seek guidance, demand wisdom, expect you to solve their problems. You become responsible for their development because they've outsourced it to you. This projection is suffocating. You can't be human anymore because they need you to be archetypal. You can't have bad days or make mistakes because you're supposed to be beyond such things. And when you inevitably fail to match their projection, they'll turn on you with devastating rage. But the other response is more immediately dangerous: warfare. Some people will hear your claim of awakening as a challenge. If you're awake, they're asleep. Their ego experiences this as threat and must eliminate that threat by proving you're not actually awake, by finding your flaws, by tearing down your credibility. They'll watch everything you do, looking for evidence that you're not as awakened as you claim. They'll test you, challenge you, try to trigger you. They'll wait for you to fail and celebrate when you do, because your failure restores their ego's stability. Jung watched this pattern destroy people who announced their spiritual attainment. Students would achieve genuine breakthroughs, announce their enlightenment, and immediately become targets. Either they'd be elevated to guru status and crushed by the projection, or they'd be attacked by egos seeking to tear them down. Jung himself never claimed to be enlightened or fully individuated. He spoke about the individuation process, shared his psychological discoveries, but never positioned himself as having completed the journey. This wasn't false modesty. It was psychological wisdom. But here's the subtle danger. You don't have to explicitly say, "I'm awakened," to trigger this dynamic. Any language that positions you as more conscious than others activates the same response. Talking about unconscious people versus conscious people with yourself in the latter category. Explaining that you've done the work that others haven't. Jung's advice: never identify as awakened, even if you are. Live from your consciousness without announcing it. Let your being speak rather than your claiming. Your consciousness is evident in how you live, not in what you declare about yourself. True awakening doesn't need to announce itself, and the moment it does, it activates shadows in others that will make you wish you'd stayed silent. But this principle of remaining silent about your development extends to one final area that seems beneficial to share, but is perhaps the most dangerous revelation of all. Jung's final warning might be the most heartbreaking. Never tell someone you can see their authentic potential, their unlived self, or their possible calling, even though you see it clearly, even though you want to help them actualize it. Because revealing what you see about their potential creates psychological dynamics that prevent them from realizing that potential. Here's the devastating psychology. When you tell someone, "I can see who you really are beneath your conditioning," or "I see your calling that you're avoiding," their ego experiences this as exposure. You're seeing through their defenses to something they've kept hidden, sometimes even from themselves. And that exposure, no matter how well-intentioned, triggers shame and resistance. They hear, "You're living falsely and I can see it." They feel, "My life choices are being judged as wrong." They experience, "I'm failing to be who I should be." None of this is what you meant. But it's how the unconscious process is being told that someone sees potential in them they're not living. Worse, your seeing their potential often increases their resistance to actualizing it. Jung called this the shadow of the positive projection. When you project authentic potential onto someone, you create pressure for them to become what you see. And humans resist pressure, even beneficial pressure. They might have been moving slowly toward their calling. Your revelation that you see it suddenly makes it feel like it's what you want for them, rather than what they want for themselves. What was emerging organically from within now feels like an external expectation they must either meet or rebel against. Jung learned this through painful experience with patients. He'd see someone's authentic potential clearly. The artist trapped in accounting, the healer trapped in corporate life. His instinct was to reflect what he saw. And consistently, patients would respond with either overwhelming pressure that paralyzed them or rebellion against the calling because it now felt like Jung's agenda. He learned, people must discover their authentic self from within, not have it revealed from without. Your role isn't to tell them who they are. It's to create space for them to discover who they are. You can see their potential, but naming it transfers it from their internal authority to your external observation. But there's an even darker consequence. They often start performing that potential for you rather than developing it for themselves. They become who you saw in them to please you, to prove you right. But it's still performance, not authenticity. You've created a more sophisticated false self, not freed their real self. Jung's advice: keep your perceptions of others' potential to yourself. See clearly, hold space, perhaps create conditions that support their emergence, but never name what you see. Let them discover their authentic calling from their own depths in their own timing. Your job is to witness, not to reveal. When someone actualizes their potential, they need to experience it as their discovery, their choice, their courage. If you've told them what you saw in them, their actualization is partly about proving you right, rather than fully about being themselves. Let me bring these warnings together. Never reveal your direct spiritual experiences because unconscious people will either worship or pathologize you. Never reveal that you can see through others' unconsciousness because it triggers their defenses. Never reveal your synchronicities as proof because it makes you seem delusional. Never reveal that you're awakened because it activates projection or warfare. And never reveal what you see about others' potential because it complicates their natural development. Jung would say, these aren't secrets you're keeping out of superiority. These are realities that unconscious people cannot receive without distortion. You're not hiding who you are. You're protecting your consciousness from dynamics that would damage it. This isn't about being inauthentic. It's about understanding that not everything that's true needs to be spoken. Not everything you see needs to be shared. Some realities are meant to be lived, not broadcast. You can be fully awakened while remaining strategically silent about specific aspects of your awakening. You can see clearly while choosing carefully what you reveal. You can live from deep consciousness while maintaining surface discretion. The awakened don't announce their awakening. They live it. They don't explain what they see. They act from it. They don't reveal others' potential. They hold space for it to emerge. True spiritual maturity includes knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. If you're spiritually awake, Jung would tell you, Your silence about certain things isn't suppression, it's protection. You're protecting your consciousness from projections that would burden it. You're protecting others from information that would trigger their shadows. You're protecting the natural unfolding of development that gets complicated by premature revelation. Live from your awakening without announcing it. See deeply without revealing what you see. Experience synchronicity without using it as proof. Know others' potential without naming it. And let your consciousness be evident in your being rather than your claiming. The people who need to recognize your consciousness will recognize it without you announcing it. Trust that living authentically from awakened consciousness is more powerful than talking about being awakened. Your spiritual experiences are sacred precisely because they're private. Your perceptions are useful precisely because you don't weaponize them. Your synchronicities are meaningful precisely because they're yours alone. Your development speaks loudest through silence. Be awake, stay awake, but be wise about what you reveal about your awakening. Some things are meant to be lived, not explained. And the more conscious you become, the more you understand the wisdom of strategic silence. If you're navigating being awake in an unconscious world, if you're learning when to speak and when to remain silent, subscribe to this channel. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.